What if the version of you that exists 1 year from today is so different, so sharper, so calmer, so more deliberate and more powerful, that the people who know you right now would barely recognize what you had become? Not because something extraordinary happened to you, but because you made a decision, quietly, privately, without announcement, to do something small and intentional every single day. And those days compounded. And compounding, as it turns out, is the most dangerous force in the universe. There is a conversation that most people never have with themselves. Not because they are lazy or indifferent or incapable of depth, but because the noise of daily life is so constant, so relentless, so expertly designed to keep you reactive and distracted and perpetually focused on the urgent at the expense of the important, that the deeper conversation never gets the silence it needs to happen. That conversation is this. Am I actually growing? Not performing growth. Not consuming content about growth. Not following people who talk about growth. But actually, day by day, choice by choice, habit by habit, becoming someone measurably better than I was yesterday. For most people, if they answer that question with complete honesty, the answer is uncomfortable. Not because they haven't tried, but because trying without strategy is just motion. And motion without direction is just exhaustion dressed up as effort. The Stoics understood this with a precision that still cuts through 2,000 years of noise. They did not talk about motivation. They did not talk about inspiration. They did not talk about waiting for the right moment or the right circumstances or the right feeling. They talked about strategy. About daily practice. About the deliberate, philosophical engineering of a life lived at its highest capacity. Today, right here, we are going to talk about 10 of those strategies. Not as ancient history. As living tools. The kind you can pick up before this conversation ends and use before the day is over. Let's begin. Strategy 1, begin every day with a reckoning. Most people begin their day by looking outward. The phone. The news. The notifications. The immediate demands of a world that has no interest in whether you are centered, grounded, or prepared before it starts making requests of you. And so they spend the entire day reactive. Pulled in whatever direction the loudest voice is pointing. Making decisions from the surface of themselves rather than from the depth. Ending the evening vaguely dissatisfied, not sure why, not sure what was missing, and repeating the entire cycle the next morning. The Stoics began their day differently. Marcus Aurelius, who governed the most powerful empire in the world and still found time to write some of the most honest and penetrating philosophical reflections in human history, began every morning with what can only be described as a reckoning. Before the world made its demands, he made his own. He asked himself what kind of person he intended to be that day. What challenges were likely to arise. How he intended to meet them. What values he refused to compromise regardless of circumstance. He was, in the most literal sense, preparing his mind before he deployed it into the day. This is not a romantic idea. It is a functional one. Neuroscience confirms what Marcus practiced intuitively, that the brain's prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for judgment, impulse control, and long-term thinking, is most accessible in the early morning before the cognitive load of the day depletes it. The person who uses those early hours to set intention is operating from their highest cognitive capacity. The person who immediately surrenders those hours to reactive consumption is spending their sharpest resource on someone else's agenda. The practice is simple. Before you check anything external, spend 10 minutes with yourself. Ask 3 questions. What do I want to accomplish today that actually matters? What is the most likely way I will get in my own way? And what is the one value I refuse to compromise before the day ends? Write the answers. Speak them. Let them land as real commitments rather than vague intentions. This is not a morning routine for the sake of aesthetics. This is a daily reckoning with who you are choosing to become. And the person who does this consistently, who shows up to their own life before showing up to everyone else's, compounds that clarity into a kind of intentionality that transforms everything it touches. Strategy 2, treat discomfort as the curriculum. Here is something that leveled people understand that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Discomfort is not the obstacle to growth. Discomfort is growth. It is the only reliable mechanism by which a human being actually develops. Every skill you currently possess was once uncomfortable. Every relationship that has depth required the discomfort of vulnerability. Every achievement in your life has a foundation built from moments when you continued despite the resistance telling you to stop. The problem is not that people don't know this intellectually. Most do. The problem is that knowing something and building your life around it are two completely different things. And most people, when the discomfort arrives, as it always does, reliably, on schedule, choose the exit. The familiar. The comfortable. The path of least resistance that feels like self-protection but is actually just slow-motion stagnation. The Stoics had a practice called voluntary discomfort. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, a man who could have lived in pure comfort for the entirety of his long life, regularly chose to sleep on the floor. To fast. To wear rough clothing. To deprive himself of the luxuries available to him. Not as punishment. Not as asceticism for its own sake. But as deliberate training of the gap between circumstance and reaction. As the practice proved to himself that his well-being did not depend on comfort. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared?" What Seneca was building, through voluntary discomfort, was something that no comfortable life can produce, the unshakable knowledge that he could handle whatever came. That difficulty was not an emergency. That his capacity exceeded his circumstances. This is what leveling up actually requires. Not the absence of difficulty. The trained, practiced, philosophically grounded ability to meet difficulty without flinching, and to extract from it the specific growth that only difficulty can produce. Seek the uncomfortable conversation you have been postponing. Take on the project that feels slightly beyond your current ability. Wake up earlier than feels natural. Do the hard thing first, before the easy things consume the day. Every time you choose discomfort over avoidance, you are not just doing something hard. You are literally expanding the ceiling of what you are capable of. And a person with a higher ceiling can build things that people with lower ceilings cannot even imagine. Strategy 3, audit your circle with ruthless honesty. There is a principle so well established in psychology, sociology, and lived human experience that it has become almost a cliché, and yet most people, despite knowing it, fail to act on it with anything close to the seriousness it deserves. You become the average of the people you spend the most time with. Not metaphorically. Not approximately. In measurable, documentable, neurologically observable ways, the people in your immediate environment shape your beliefs about what is normal, what is possible, what is acceptable, what is worth pursuing, and what level of life is available to a person like you. This means that the single most powerful environmental lever you can pull on the trajectory of your life is the composition of your closest relationships. Epictetus, a man who had no wealth, no social status, no external power of any kind, built one of the most formidable philosophical minds in human history. And he was uncompromising about this. He taught his students to be extraordinarily selective about whose company they kept. Not out of arrogance. Out of the clear-eyed understanding that the wrong company doesn't just waste your time. It rewires your standards. There was a young architect named Samuel who was talented, ambitious, and going nowhere. Not because he lacked ability, his professors had seen something genuinely exceptional in him. But because he spent every evening with a group of friends whose defining characteristic was a shared, comfortable cynicism about ambition. That's not realistic. Who do you think you are? Nobody from here makes it like that. The cynicism was never hostile. It was warm, familiar, funny even. But it was corrosive. And Samuel absorbed it, slowly, without noticing, until his own ambition had quieted to match the frequency of the room. 1 year after meeting a single mentor who thought differently, who expected more, who operated at a higher standard and simply assumed Samuel would too. Samuel produced work that changed the direction of his career entirely. The work didn't change. The company did. Audit your circle. Not cruelly, you do not need to dramatically exile people from your life. But honestly. Ask yourself, with genuine rigor, after spending time with this person, am I more expansive or more contracted? More energized or more depleted? More certain of my potential or more doubtful of it? The answers will tell you everything you need to know about where to invest your relational energy going forward. Strategy 4, master the conversation you have with yourself. Of all the conversations happening in your life right now, the most consequential one is the one nobody else can hear. The one running in the background of every experience. The one that narrates what things mean, what you deserve, what is possible, what you should be afraid of, what your failures say about your future, and what kind of person you fundamentally are. Most people have never seriously examined this conversation. They have simply inherited it, from childhood, from early experience, from the accumulated messaging of environments that may have had very little interest in their flourishing. And they carry it forward, unexamined, as if it were fact rather than the deeply subjective, heavily conditioned, absolutely revisable narrative it actually is. The Stoics called this the inner citadel. The interior space, the judgment, the interpretation, the meaning-making faculty, that no external force could access without permission. Marcus Aurelius returned to this concept obsessively because he understood that a man who controlled his empire but not his inner narrative was not actually in control of anything that mattered. He wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Not the quality of your circumstances. Not the behavior of other people. Not the outcomes of your efforts. The quality, the honesty, the discipline, the intentional direction, of what you say to yourself about all of those things." Leveling up requires that you become a serious, rigorous, unflinching editor of this inner conversation. That you begin to notice when the narrative is serving your growth and when it is simply recycling old fear in new packaging. That you develop the capacity to catch a self-limiting thought mid-sentence, and rewrite it. Not with toxic positivity. Not with the empty affirmations that paper over real problems without solving them. But with the honest, evidence-based, philosophically grounded counter-narrative of someone who is genuinely committed to seeing themselves and their situation clearly. The inner conversation is the foundation of everything. Get it right, and everything built on it stands. Leave it unexamined, and everything built on it inherits its instability. Strategy 5, protect your focus like it is your most valuable asset. Because it is. Everything you want to build, every skill, every relationship, every achievement, every dimension of a life lived at its highest level, requires the one resource that the modern world is most aggressively and expertly designed to steal from you. Sustained, directed, single-pointed focus. There was a sculptor named Elias who worked on large-scale pieces that took months to complete. People who visited his studio always remarked on the same thing, not the beauty of the finished work, but the quality of his presence while he worked. He was, in the most complete sense of the phrase, entirely there. No music. No interruptions. No division of attention between the work and anything else. When asked how he produced what he produced, Elias said something that stayed with everyone who heard it. "I do not multitask. I do not believe in multitask. I believe that anything worth doing deserves the whole of me. And anything that gets less than the whole of me gets less than I am capable of. I refuse to give less than I am capable of." This is not just an artistic philosophy. It is a life philosophy. And the research backs it with unambiguous force. Multitasking does not exist as a productive human capacity. What we call multitasking is actually rapid task switching, and every switch costs cognitive resources, degrades output quality, and trains the attention toward fragmentation rather than depth. The person who can focus, genuinely, completely, without fracture, for 2 concentrated hours produces more meaningful output than the person who works distractedly for 8. Not because they worked harder. Because they brought the whole of themselves to the work rather than a fraction. Protect your focused hours. Create them deliberately. Defend them unapologetically. Turn off everything that competes for the attention those hours deserve. And then bring the whole of yourself to whatever is in front of you. That wholeness, that complete, undivided, fully present attention, is the rarest and most powerful thing any human being can offer to a task, a relationship, or a life. 5 strategies in. And I want you to notice something, not just about what we have covered, but about how it fits together. Because these are not 5 separate, unrelated ideas. They are 5 interlocking disciplines that reinforce each other at every point. The person who begins the day with a reckoning is better equipped to choose discomfort intentionally. The person who has audited their circle is surrounded by people who reinforce rather than erode their standards. The person who has mastered their inner conversation brings a cleaner, clearer, more honest mind to every focused hour. And the person who protects their focus actually has the depth of output that makes all of this feel worth it. This is a system. And systems compound. There is a particular kind of person who makes progress look effortless. You have seen them. Maybe you know one. They move through life with a quality of quiet momentum that is difficult to articulate but impossible to miss. They are not louder than everyone else. They are not more talented by any obvious measure. They do not seem to be grinding in the way that grinding is usually performed, frantically, visibly, exhaustedly. They simply keep getting better. Week after week. Month after month. Year after year. As if growth were not something they are pursuing but something they have become. And the thing that separates them from the people who stay the same, the thing that nobody posts about because it is too unglamorous, too patient, too resistant to being captured in a 30-second clip, is that they have internalized the second half of what we are building today. 5 more strategies. The ones that go beneath behavior into identity. The ones that don't just change what you do, they change who you fundamentally are. Let's finish this. Strategy 6, play the long game in a world addicted to the instant. We live in the age of the immediate. Instant results. Overnight success. Viral moments. The intoxicating illusion, broadcast relentlessly across every platform, that transformation is something that happens suddenly, dramatically, in a single catalytic moment that changes everything. It does not work that way. It has never worked that way. And the people who have built the most genuinely impressive lives, the ones whose growth is real rather than performed, whose capability is deep rather than surface level, whose results compound rather than collapse, they understood something that the culture of immediacy desperately does not want you to believe. The most powerful results in human life are invisible for a very long time before they become undeniable. There was a woman named Adiz who decided at 28 to learn a new discipline from the ground up. She was starting late by conventional measures. The people around her were already established in their fields. She had no advantage of early exposure, no network, no shortcut. What she had was a decision. She would improve by 1% every single day. Not dramatically. Not in ways that anyone around her would notice or celebrate or even register. Just 1%. Every day. Quietly. Faithfully. Without requiring external validation to continue. In the first 6 months, nothing visible changed. Her colleagues saw the same Adiz. Her output looked largely the same. There was no moment of obvious breakthrough to point to. But beneath the surface, in the neural pathways being built, in the pattern recognition being developed, in the intuitive understanding that only sustained repetition produces, something was compounding at a rate that the outside world could not yet see. By year 3, Adiz was operating at a level that made people who had been in the field for a decade look at her with a kind of bewildered respect. Not because she had worked harder than them necessarily. Because she had worked longer, with more patience, more consistency, more willingness to be unremarkable in the short term in service of being extraordinary in the long one. The Stoics called this melody, sustained practice. Not the burst of enthusiasm that attends every new beginning. The quiet, unglamorous, daily return to the work regardless of how it feels, regardless of whether anyone is watching, regardless of whether the results are yet visible enough to justify the effort. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." The people wasting it are largely the ones waiting for the dramatic moment of transformation. The people building something real are the ones who have made peace with the long, invisible, compounding work of becoming. Play the long game. In a culture addicted to the instant, patience is not just a virtue. It is a competitive advantage. Strategy 7. Turn every setback into a syllabus. Let me tell you something about failure that most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid hearing. Failure is not the opposite of leveling up. Failure is the mechanism of leveling up. Not the romantic, Instagram caption version of failure, where you fail beautifully and rise dramatically and everyone applauds your resilience. The real version. The version that is embarrassing and confusing and that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning running through everything you should have done differently. That version. The version nobody wants. The version that is, nonetheless, the most reliable teacher available to anyone serious about becoming more than they currently are. The Stoics had a practice called amor fati, love of fate. And I want to be very precise about what this means, because it is one of the most misunderstood concepts in Stoic philosophy. Amor fati does not mean passive acceptance of everything that happens. It does not mean pretending that bad outcomes are secretly good. It does not mean the forced positivity of someone who has confused denial with wisdom. It means this, the commitment to extract value from every experience, including and especially the painful ones, because the alternative is to let difficulty cost you twice. Once in the pain of the experience itself. And again in the waste of the lesson it was trying to teach you. There was a man named Kofi who launched a business at 31 that failed completely within 18 months. He lost money. He lost time. He lost, temporarily, a significant portion of the confidence he had carried into the venture. But Kofi did something in the aftermath that most people who fail do not do. He conducted what he called a failure audit. He sat down, alone, with a notebook in complete honesty, and went through every decision he had made from the beginning to the end. Not to punish himself. Not to perform self-awareness for anyone watching. But to extract, with surgical precision, every lesson the failure had to teach him. What did I misread about the market? Where did I let optimism override evidence? Which relationships did I invest in that didn't serve the work? Where did I move too fast? Where did I move too slowly? What did I know earlier than I admitted to myself? The audit took 3 weeks. And at the end of it, Kofi had something that no successful first venture could have given him, a detailed, personalized, hard-won education in exactly the ways his judgment needed to develop. His second business did not fail. Because he had turned the first failure into a syllabus, and studied it with the rigor it deserved. Every setback you have experienced, every failure, every disappointment, every outcome that landed differently than you needed it to, contains a curriculum. The question is not whether you experienced it. The question is whether you extracted what it was trying to teach you. Go back. Audit honestly. Study rigorously. The tuition has already been paid. You might as well get the education. Strategy 8, live by standards, not moods. This strategy is the one that separates the people who level up consistently from the people who level up occasionally, and then slide back. Because here is what nobody tells you about motivation. It is completely unreliable. Motivation is a feeling. And feelings, as any honest human being will confirm, are subject to sleep quality, blood sugar, the weather, the last conversation you had, the last piece of news you consumed, and approximately 10,000 other variables that have nothing to do with your actual values or your actual capacity. A life built on motivation is a life that is good when the feeling is good and stagnant when it isn't. Which means it is, at best, inconsistent. And inconsistency is the enemy of compounding. Because compounding requires continuity. It requires the daily, faithful, feeling independent return to the standard you have set for yourself. Standards are different from motivation in one crucial way. Standards are not contingent on how you feel. They are commitments made in a clear moment, about who you have decided to be, that hold even when the clarity has faded and the mood has shifted, and every soft, comfortable, reasonable-sounding voice in your head is suggesting that today could be an exception. Marcus Aurelius understood this so completely that he built an entire private discipline around it. He was not always motivated. He said so himself, with a candor that is almost shocking for a man of his stature. Some mornings, he wrote, he did not want to get up. He did not feel the fire. He did not experience the inspiration. But he had standards that existed independently of the fire. And so he got up anyway. And he did the work anyway. And he met the day at the level his values required, not the level his mood was offering. Examine your life and ask honestly, am I operating from standards or moods? Do I exercise when I feel like it, or because I have decided that physical discipline is non-negotiable for the person I am becoming? Do I do the deep work when inspiration arrives, or because I have committed to showing up to it regardless of whether inspiration has shown up first? Do I treat people with integrity when it is easy, or because integrity is a standard I hold even when it costs something? The answers will show you exactly where the gaps are between the life you are living and the life you are capable of. Set the standards. Write them down. Make them specific and non-negotiable and completely independent of how Tuesday morning feels. And then live by them, especially on the days when living by them is the last thing you feel like doing. Those days are not the obstacle to your growth. Those days are the growth. Strategy 9. Cultivate stillness as a superpower. In a world that rewards noise, that mistakes busyness for productivity, urgency for importance, constant motion for genuine progress, the ability to be still is one of the rarest and most powerful capacities a human being can develop. And I mean stillness in the deepest sense. Not just the physical act of sitting quietly, though that matters too. But the interior stillness of a mind that is not constantly reacting, constantly performing, constantly generating noise in response to noise. The stillness of a person who can sit with a hard question long enough to hear an honest answer. Who can resist the impulse to fill every silence with sound and every uncertainty with premature conclusion. The Stoics were students of stillness. Not because they were passive. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire, Seneca advised one, Epictetus taught generations of students. They were profoundly active people. But they understood that action without stillness is just reaction. And reaction, as we have established, is the opposite of the intentional, directed, values-driven life they were building. There is a quality of thinking that is only available in stillness. It is the thinking that connects things that busyness keeps separate. That sees patterns that noise keeps hidden. That accesses the deeper layer of wisdom beneath the surface layer of information. That produces the insight, sudden, clear, entirely unforced, that changes the direction of a project, a relationship, a life. This quality of thinking cannot be scheduled into a packed, frantic, constantly stimulated day. It requires space. Genuine space. The kind that most people are now so uncomfortable with that they fill it automatically, with their phone, with music, with the podcast that starts playing the moment the previous one ends. Build stillness into your day as a non-negotiable practice. Not as relaxation, though it will restore you. Not as meditation in any formal sense, though formal practice is valuable. Simply as the deliberate choice to be with your own mind, unmediated, for a portion of every day. Walk without earphones. Sit without a screen. Let your thoughts move without directing them. Let the questions you have been avoiding surface without immediately running from them. The answers you are looking for, to your career, your relationships, your sense of direction, your deepest uncertainties about who you are becoming, are not in more content. They are not in more input. They are in the stillness you keep filling with noise. Let it be quiet. And listen to what the quiet has been trying to tell you. Strategy 10. Measure yourself against yesterday's version of you. And now we arrive at the final strategy. The one that ties everything together. The one that, if you take nothing else from this entire conversation, I want you to carry forward as a permanent operating principle. Stop measuring yourself against other people. I want to say that with the full weight it deserves. Because the habit of measuring your progress against someone else's position is not just unproductive, it is a category error. It is comparing two completely different journeys, two completely different starting points, two completely different sets of advantages and obstacles and invisible circumstances, and then drawing conclusions from that comparison as if it were meaningful data. It is not meaningful data. It is noise dressed as information. The only comparison that produces genuine insight, the only measurement that tells you something true and useful about your actual progress, is the comparison between who you are today and who you were yesterday. Last month. Last year. Are you more patient than you were? More honest? More disciplined? More capable of sitting with difficulty without running? More able to distinguish between what matters and what merely feels urgent? More aligned between what you say you value and how you actually spend your days? These are the questions of a person who is genuinely leveling up. Not am I ahead of him or am I further along than her, but am I better than I was? Am I more fully becoming the person I am capable of being? Am I closer today than I was yesterday to the life I have decided is worth building? There was an older man named Emmanuel who had lived what most people would consider an unremarkable life by external measures. He had not built an empire. He had not achieved public recognition. He had not accumulated the kind of wealth or status that the world uses to signal that a life has been well lived. But when his grandchildren asked him, as they did, every time they visited, whether he was happy with his life, he answered the same way every time. Without hesitation. Without the pause that genuine uncertainty produces. I am better today than I was yesterday. I have been better every year than I was the year before. And I intend to be better tomorrow than I am today. What else could a person ask for? What else, indeed? This is the goal. Not to be the best in the room. Not to win the comparison. Not to achieve the external markers that the world has agreed to treat as evidence of a valuable life. To be, genuinely, measurably, honestly, better than you were. Every single day. That is leveling up. Not as a destination. As a direction. As a permanent orientation toward growth that becomes, over time, not something you do but something you are. The full picture, all 10 strategies as one life. Let me bring it all together. Because these 10 strategies are not 10 separate practices living in 10 separate compartments of your life. They are one life. Lived with intention. It is the life of a person who wakes before the world makes its demands and reclaims the morning for themselves. Who chooses the uncomfortable path because they have learned, in their body, not just their mind, that discomfort is where capacity lives. Who looks honestly at the people around them and invests their relational energy where it grows them. Who has become a rigorous, compassionate editor of their own inner conversation. Who focuses completely on what is in front of them, bringing the whole of themselves rather than a fraction. Who plays the long game with the patience of someone who understands that the most powerful results are invisible until they are undeniable. Who minds every failure for its curriculum rather than fleeing from it. Who lives by standards that hold even when the mood does not. Who cultivates the stillness that produces the quality of thought that busyness never can. And who measures themselves, every single day, against the only benchmark that tells the truth, the person they were yesterday. This is not a perfect life. The Stoics never promised perfection. They promised something better, something more honest and more sustaining than perfection. They promised progress. Daily, faithful, compounding, unglamorous, non-negotiable progress in the direction of the person you are fully capable of becoming. That person is not far away. They are one decision ahead of where you are right now. Make the decision. And then make it again tomorrow. And the day after. Until the decisions become instinct. Until the instinct becomes identity. Until the identity becomes the life, the actual, daily, lived reality, of someone who leveled up every single day. Not in the moments anyone was watching. In the quiet, private, faithful moments when nobody was. That is where the real work happens. And that is where the real transformation lives. Subscribe to the Stoic Path. If you made it here, to the very last word of part 2, then something in you already knows that this is not ordinary content. This is not the kind of conversation that asks nothing of you. This is the kind that hands you a mirror and asks you to look honestly at what you see, and then gives you the tools to build something better from what you find there. That is what the Stoic Path does. Every single week.